Welcome to another episode of the Unitrans podcast. Today, we want to have a conversation about the animal feed industry and the logistics systems that support food production across Africa. Feed logistics is a critical but often overlooked link in the agricultural value chain, influencing reliability, quality, and continuity across food systems. Joining me in the discussion today is Ryno Berg, who is GM of Consumer and Chairman of AFMA, Anina Hunter. Please tell us a bit about your roles, and we look forward to having a conversation around the importance of purpose-built specialized logistics systems in meeting the unique demands of the feed industry. So welcome, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Francisco.
So my name is Anina Hunter. I head up the EPOL feed mills across South Africa. So we've got 6 feed mills across South Africa. And I'm also the chairman of AFMA, which is the Animal Feed Manufacturing Association of South Africa.
I'm Ryno Berg, General Manager of the Consumer Division within Unitrans, overlooking the poultry and animal feed divisions.
So to start us off, we'd like to ask you, why is a one-size-fits-all logistics approach risky when it comes to feed production and distribution?
I think if you look at the genetics of the animals that we feed in the food chain, it's been developed over years, and we've got to refine genetics to ensure that we operate and produce cost-effective food for South Africa and the world. With this refined genetics, we've also got precision feed that we formulate. So a general transporter that does not understand the feed value chain will not get it right. You need to understand when companies contract in transporters to transport the feed, this is the face of the company on the farm. So the farmer gets to trust them. And if your precision is not right, if your biosecurity is not right, and if you pose any risk to the performance of the animals on farm, it does not work. The other aspect that we've got to consider is that animals don't pause and wait if there's no feed. So public holidays, weekends, feed needs to be delivered, needs to be on time, it needs to be correct within the right biosecurity protocols.
So livestock, you're dealing with livestock, and livestock, there's several factors that can impact the consumption of animal feed. So you need to be, from a transport and logistics company perspective, you need to be agile enough to adapt to those factors and react swiftly enough, but also in the same sense remain cost effective.
So tell us, how do specialized assets, processes, and people help protect quality, consistency, and safety across the feed supply chain?
Yes, all 3 of those is extremely important. If we look at specialized assets, we transport our feed in bulk tankers dedicated to only the one feed mill to make sure that you have no cross-contamination from external products. We have closed offloading or discharge booms that discharge on the farm so that the feed is not exposed to any contaminants on the farm. And then also we have separated compartments so no cross-contamination can take place in that. If we look at the processes, we have specific sequences that we transport feed with. So taking into consideration biosecurity, we would firstly discharge feed to high-risk farms like breeder farms, or have dedicated trucks for breeder farms, and then just discharge to broiler farms. And often we will go from the youngest to the oldest farms to try and protect your biosecurity chain. What's also very important is that the process is that we seal the trucks to make sure that no theft takes place. We need to realize 70% of our input cost in broiler production is feed cost. So it's extremely cost sensitive, and we're working with this commodity that we have to protect at all times. And then also, if we look at people, people is extremely important. The drivers need to understand that they're part of the food value chain, and we're feeding a nation. And they need to do simple things like keep their cabin clean, avoid mud pools and manure heaps, driving over that, and just ensuring that they apply the basic biosecurity principle. I think professionalism of the drivers leads to trust of the farmers and the feed mills.
Our staff are trained in the risks and exposures that they could face with the processes and procedures that's in place to mitigate those risks, and also the repercussions of non-adherence. They fully understand the impact of not complying with the processes and how it can impact the operations. So if your staff are not properly trained, you can have the best assets and the best procedures, but if they're not following it, then it's all in void.
Now, the term biosecurity has been thrown around quite a lot, and we know in the feed industry, biosecurity is a non-negotiable. What measures or design principles in purpose-built feed logistics help minimize contamination risks and protect the nutrition pipeline that producers rely on?
I think that's a very interesting concept. We've seen how diseases like foot and mouth disease, avian influenza, and African swine fever has impacted our food value chain over the years. So biosecurity is non-negotiable, but it must be something that we live. It can't just be a checklist. I think that's very important. But for this reason, we've got a lot of protocols in place. We've already spoke about dedicated trucks, closed discharge systems. We've got routine cleaning, dry cleaning, disinfecting of the trucks and the cabs in place. We've got access control systems in place on the farms and at the feed mills. But if we then just look at the guideline that AFMA gives us, AFMA tries and puts protocols and procedures together and encourages industry to follow good manufacturing practices. So with this, it actually gives credibility to the feed mill and the logistic partner that's part of the AFMA audit process. So you'll get audited to make sure that you comply to this process. It's very important because biosecurity doesn't just end at the feed mill. It's up the value chain and down the value chain. And what I mean by that, it's all the raw materials coming into the feed factory, and it's all the final feed going out of the feed factory that's got to comply with these biosecurity practices. So it's a holistic approach to protect it, because I think we need to realize biosecurity risks can happen anywhere in the value chain, and we've got to comply across the value chain.
From a logistics perspective, so there's processes and procedures that I can alluded to, but further on is to be cautious or to understand where you service your trucks, what potential risks are there, because that's further additional to the farms or the loading areas or the offloading areas. But where do you maintain your trucks? Is there possibility of contamination there? Your staff, where do they stay? What's around them? Are they exposed to potential risks? So it goes a little bit further. Like Anina said, it becomes like a lifestyle and not just a process that you are following. And people are being trained, highly trained in that, and we make sure that they do understand those exposures and risks. And we create the environment for them where they are free to say, I have been exposed. And we can manage it accordingly, where they could keep quiet and then you open up the risk.
So what role does logistics planning play in supporting producers and downstream food systems?
We've already spoke about the fact that animals don't pause if we want to have a public holiday or a weekend. So it's a non-stop system, and that's why planning is extremely important. We need to ensure that feed is delivered timeously, on time, as scheduled, and at the right state and the right quality at all times. So I think in terms of logistic planning, what it then becomes very important is that your logistical partner plans the maintenances and the services, and do not skip on your disinfection or cleaning system in the process, because it's extremely important for biosecurity. So you really need to make sure that all of this planning is done efficiently so that your feed is still delivered on time. One aspect that I always like to mention is that logistical effectiveness creates space for the farmers to focus on their operations. They don't have to worry about trucks being late. So if a logistical company is silent on a farm, you don't even notice them and you don't talk about them, that's the ideal situation to be in. If you're talking about them, there's a problem, and that's not ideal.
Now, from a planning perspective, there's two aspects to it. One is the biosecurity and the pure operational part to it. Schedule your loads in a sequence that complies with biosecurity protocols, from the youngest to the oldest, or from the most fragile to the older birds, where you can have a little bit of more exposure. So it's that practical view. And then secondly, it's from an economical perspective. So it's very expensive assets, it's specialized. So you want to get the absolute value and throughput through them, and you plan accordingly to make sure that you maximize the volumes that you deliver, so you can dilute the cost overall for the feed producer.
So now if we look at innovation is reshaping feed logistics, from smart routing to real-time monitoring. Where do you see technology making the biggest practical difference without over-engineering the system?
Yeah, I think in poultry we like to say stick to the basics and keep it simple. So I think there's a lot of innovation and technology out there, but because we're such a cost-sensitive environment, we need to use innovations that are going to add value at the end of the day. If it's just smart technology that you add and you can't really analyze anything from that or get any real improvements from that, then I don't think it's adding value. So having smart route planning, as you'd mentioned, is definitely an option to make sure that your feed's on time at the farm in real time. And then also just monitoring the trucks real time to know where they are. If the farmer's finding the feed mill fuming already and you say, it's at your gate, don't worry, we'll deliver shortly. So all these things are very important, and obviously protecting the loads, because it's quite expensive cargo that we are transporting. So any innovation technology that adds value to the business must be used, in my opinion. Anything that's nice to have, expensive, and gives you a nice dashboard doesn't make sense for me to use.
This is a specialized field, and you will always have specialists operating because there's a lot of factors that can determine the consumption. You need to be agile, like we mentioned earlier. And AI can't always be as agile as a human would be. Conversations happening between the plant and the farmer, like Anina mentioned, and sometimes special discussions need to happen. However, there is technology that can assist the specialists in their decision making and communication. For instance, routing and planning. But we've got other tools, automation of documentation, and where the drivers log all their progresses. That's more real life than reactive, and one can then have better communication to the farmers. All of that exists, but it still remains critical to have a specialist on the floor that can understand what's happening, what are the exposures, and to react to it, because AI at this stage are not there yet. We deal with emotions, we deal with metabolisms, if I can say it like that. So in terms of the essence, we can't wait for a system to generate the right answer. However, I do think there's space in feed bins, maybe communicating directly to the stock levels directly to the feed producers, and from there integrate with the logistics. So there's tools that can do that, and I think that's where a lot of value will be added to remove waste out of the system, cleaning production lines on your side, and for us to better plan assets to be available when the product is completed, that the truck is available to move again, getting the throughput through the assets to reduce the overall cost for the feed producer. So those things are definitely in the pipeline. We are faced with diesel and fuel cost, and innovation from a capital and from equipment perspective. How do we reduce those running costs? Maintenance, tires, fuel, what can we do? The roads are not always getting better, so we need to work smarter, understand what's in the market, and see how we can address those risks and those exposures, and make it more cost effective for the feed producer, for the animal grower, and ultimately for the consumer.
Lastly, let's talk about partnerships. Now, feed systems rely on close alignment between logistics operators, AFMA, and producers. How do strong partnerships contribute to reliability, compliance, and the performance of the broader food value chain?
Yeah, I think this alignment is extremely important, and that's also a role that AFMA plays. AFMA does not just help the transporter and the feed mill to be generally compliant. If we look at logistical partners, they look at biosecurity, hygiene, behavior on farm. So there's additional compliance models built into the AFMA protocols and good manufacturing practices that we focus on in order to improve the logistical partners. So it mustn't be a case of I'm doing business with you because I like you. It must be I'm doing business with you because I trust you. And I trust you because you're going through all the audits. You have a system in place. It's not just a general come to work day, load a truck and go off to the farm. There's certain steps that we've got to go through. We've got to ensure that all these steps are met before we leave the farm gate or before we enter the feed mill's gate.
Yeah, agreed. Because we're dealing with specialized equipment, and we, from a transport and logistics perspective, try to do a bit of innovation and see how we can improve on the current equipment that we are using, make it more economical and feasible. You need to have partners. You need to partner up with the industry, AFMA, and all the role players within it, so that you've got something sustainable that you can do research and development on, and that you can improve on. So it's vice versa. And again, to Anina's point, trust. It's about trust. It's about when there's a crisis, have the trust. Phone, you can phone, and without questions assist, because you're dealing with livestock, and you can't store or safeguard or put it on hold. You need to feed the animals, and that's the first priority. And if there's no trust, if there's no collaboration between the different partners, then it's going to be quite difficult to achieve
Strenuous
that goal.
relationship.
100%. But yeah, I think there's a lot of conversations that always happen between the parties, and especially when it's at budget time and rates. But when this crisis is, then it's nice to see how people take hands and stand together against the crisis. It doesn't matter who's the logistics partner, who's the feed mill, but we understand livestock, animal welfare, all of that at stake. And
I think if you think about it, years ago, feed companies used to own their own trucks and their own assets, and with time we've migrated to contracting that in. So it has to speak to the fact that we're getting better service. It's easier to manage the assets, there's trust, and they understand the business. So it really has become a partnership over all these years.
Such interesting, valuable input that you guys are giving us. We really do appreciate that. Through this episode, we've learned that the reliability of food systems is influenced well before products reach shelves, starting with dependable feed supply. Thank you, Ryno and Anina, for joining us and shedding light on vital but often invisible parts of the agricultural ecosystem. You've reminded us that purpose-built logistics enables resilience, quality, and long-term growth across Africa's food systems. In our next episode, we continue the discussion about how sector-specific logistics is shaping everyday life on the continent.